Restaurant Unstoppable. Inspire, empower, and transform the industry. Take us through that process, things you learned, any advice for somebody who's listening to us who's in that phase of planning, raising money. What did you learn the hard way that you wish you knew, that you know now that you wish you knew then?
So one is to really focus in on coming up with a great plan, a great business plan. And some people might undersell that as being not so important. If you have a deck that's, sells the dream, that's enough. But for us, what we were doing in writing that business plan was not simply creating something that was going to be attractive to our investors, but we were actually thinking through what we're going to do with the money, thinking through how our business is going to operate so that we can actually deliver on the vision that we're selling to these investors. And every time we'd go and meet with an investor, they'd ask questions that were not necessarily answered in the deck, and we'd go home. Sometimes we'd answer in the moment. Sometimes we'd have to go home and think about it. And when we went home and thought about it and had a conversation about it, we'd realize that there was an element that we didn't have thought through.
So go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say about that is that if you're a chef and you know all about food and you know how to set up a kitchen, you know how to staff a kitchen, you know how to motivate, you know how to do all that stuff, but you're not necessarily a great business person, that's important for you to think through because that's oftentimes the difference between a restaurant that has really great food and really great service but has no money in the bank and longevity of a prosperous business.
Yeah.
If you don't know anything about HR, that's a hole that you either need to find a partner who does, or you need to school yourself or be part of something that can support that, and that needs to be part of your budget.
Or outsource a service.
That's what I mean.
There's tons
Absolutely.
of services that exist today. It didn't exist back in 2002. Like people are starting to realize I can create a business and just be this to a company. A company doesn't need to have all these things internally today. There's services that you can contract and be a solution for now until you get to a point where you can keep it in-house.
That's right. But if you don't think about it,
yeah,
it'll be your first emergency that determines that, oh, now I got to go shop for that.
Yeah.
As opposed to proactively mitigating the circumstance to begin with by thinking those things through. And, one of our shortcomings early on was that we didn't really think much about marketing. We knew how to tell stories, and we knew that we needed a PR person to help us tell those stories and get them out there into food trades. And that's all we did. And of course it predates social media, but we were late to the dance on marketing because it wasn't something that we really valued or thought too much about. We had a really low level of sophistication in that.
I'm a little guilty of that too. But I do think there's something to be said about four walls marketing when you're first getting started and just taking care of that person that's right in front of you.
100%.
You can't discredit that either.
No, and listen, we staked our whole marketing campaign on it. It was let's take care of the customer. Let's have great music playing. Let's have a great service experience and amazing food, and hope that people go out and talk about it.
Yeah.
And then if we can tell stories about our food or about our chefs, then that's enough.
So what kind of stories you knew to tell stories, but where were you in 2005? Where were these stories living?
Well, in 2005, they weren't living anywhere. But in 2006, once we'd opened the restaurant, we had a PR person, Karis Life, and she was connected to the food magazines. And because we were doing interesting food at an unheard of price point.
With great values.
With great value. And because we were doing something progressive, there was a story, there was a pitch, there was a tremendous amount of interest. And at first, the stories were about the food. They were about our farming partners. They were about Eric and Matt and David doing something anti-corporate. They were cool stories. When we opened our second restaurant in 2008, I realize I'm jumping ahead, but they became about Pete and Ryan down in San Diego, homegrown talent from Point Loma, California, opening a restaurant in Point Loma. Well, it had nothing to do with us, had nothing to do with Los Angeles, had nothing to do with anything but a local neighborhood restaurant doing the kind of food that you'd spend $100 for.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm interested. You said one of the first things you have to do is have a good business plan. what makes a business plan good, a great business plan? What was great about your business plan?
In no particular order, imagine that you have a business and break it down into its departments, to the core pieces, expertises of the company, and address each one. That's one. Think it through, because what will force you to do is think through the ones that you're not good at, that you shy away from. That's one. Two, write it from the perspective of allaying the concerns of an investor. So an investor has concerns about how their money is going to be spent, whether they're ever going to see their money again, how they'll see their money again, what we're going to do to be prosperous. So we have to, if we're asking for money, that's the main purpose of this tool, this investment deck that we're creating. Think it through from their perspective.
Yeah, I wrote down the first time you mentioned. You said, you had written down what we're going to do with the money. So you have a plan. Like, give us this money. Okay, what are you going to do with it? Be ready to answer those questions. How do you plan on making this money more money?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you can't just be like, thanks for the money. We'll figure it out and get back to you when we have a plan. Like, you got to show them that you have intention with this money. What were the questions they were asking you that you didn't have answers to?
Marketing. Some of our investors that were a little more sophisticated were asking about corporate oversight, your board of directors, how decisions are being made, what prevents you from running off with all the money, how do you vote yourself an increase in pay, like things that we're like, I don't know.
Yeah,
we don't even have a plan to pay ourselves yet.
So when you would get these questions, what would you do?
Well, like I said, we'd sit together. Either one of us would have a smart enough answer to get to the next phase of the conversation, or we'd say, you know what, truthfully, we don't know.
Yeah.
But give us a minute to think about it, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah. I think one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten when raising capital is know that your business plan is a living, breathing, dynamic thing, because it's going to get holes poked in it. And go into every deal, every conversation with the ways to listen, to take away the no's. They're going to tell you a no. Mm-hmm. Okay, why did they tell you? Find out why it's a no. They're going to, because you didn't have an answer for this, figure that out, go back. And constantly just take away the no's, until there's no more no's left. And then you'll start to get investors, right? And it sounds like that's what you were doing.
Well said. I mean, we had a lot of no's. I think primarily because we were doing something that hadn't been done before. Mm-hmm. And so there's a real easy way to poke holes in that, particularly in the restaurant business, a 95% failure rate. So we got a lot of early no's, and there were plenty of sad beers at local dive bars where we'd sit and say, man, we're 3 months out, 4 months out, 5 months out, and we still don't have enough money to even get started, let alone finance an entire opening.
So when did that start to change?
We got a yes, and it pumped us up. And when we got a yes, the wind feels like it's at your back for a minute.
Yeah.
And that prompts you to have more conversations. And I think that one piece of advice would be, if you're getting no's, work harder to get yeses. Mm-hmm. And know that a yes is coming. No KNOW that a yes is coming.